Welcome to DTP Meet the Client, the podcast where we dive into the stories behind achievements in social housing and gain insights from those making a difference on the ground. I'm Angela Lomax from DTP, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Sue Sutton, Chief Executive of Salix Homes. Hello, Sue.
Hi, Angela.
Recently, Salix Homes achieved a prestigious C1 rating from the Regulator of Social Housing, making it one of only a few organisations in England to reach this top standard. At the same time, it also achieved G1 and V2 ratings. DTP were privileged to provide some support to Salix in their preparations, and today we'll explore the journey Salix took to get there, the lessons learned, and what other social housing providers might take from this experience. So let's start. Sue, bit of a broad question to start off with, but what does achieving the C1 rating mean for Salix Homes?
I have thought about this long and hard and been asked many times since following our inspection and following the publication of our result. I suppose for Salix and for the sector as a whole, really, we were kind of entering into a bit of the unknown with the inspection, and we were one of the first to be inspected under the new regime. But you know what? The C1 rating itself is an absolute testament to the people who are here now, be they our employees, our board, our involved customers. But it's an absolute testament to the people who've gone before us as well. I feel this has been a journey, and it's certainly been a journey, I think, since Salix the Almo was born. So for me, the C1 rating is absolutely a testament to how we do our business. And I think if you do what you do and you do the right thing, then we all should be C1s. And I don't say that lightly because I know we've all got challenges. And I would also add that we are not perfect and we still have things we want to improve. But for me, I think it was about the validation, really, that what we do as a business was part of our DNA, I would say, and the standards we try to adhere to every day in kind of our day-to-day business. It is fantastic and it's great. You know, I'm due to finish this year, so what a way to go. But yeah, for me, it's about what we do, and we do the right thing because it is the right thing to do.
So just take us back to, well, when you got the call from the regulator. And I just wonder if you could walk us through the key steps that you took in preparing for the inspection and how early planning might have contributed to your success.
Yeah, I would say definitely early planning and as early as possible. And we knew we were going to be in the Q1 cohort of inspections. Probably knew that in January, towards the end of January. Met with our contacting the regulator, Anthony, and subsequently then met with our lead inspector. So we knew even before the consumer standards were published that we were going to be in that Q1 group. And that was only because it was Canbar 10 and it was the 4-year cycle. So what we did from very early on, really, I suppose, before we were even got the official call, we started looking at what we needed to do to get prepared for it. Although the consumer standards hadn't been published, we'd self-assessed ourselves against the draft, what had gone out for consultation. So I'm pleased to say that, you know, on the whole, we were compliant with those draft standards. Yes, we thought some things might be tweaked and changed. So we started to prepare for real, I suppose, getting ourselves ready was probably January 2024. And we just started thinking about it quite logically. So what would the regulator need to see? What would the regulator want to know? And know how our board get assurance, know about how our customers get assurance. So we took that time, even before we got the official call, to kind of start setting things up and how we would structure our document submission and all of those things. And then once we did get the call, we kind of then sat down with, okay, what are they asking for here? You know, let's not give them 101 documents when actually they're probably only asking for 2. And also for each section of the document submission list, We tried to make it very clear how things linked. So where our customers have been involved and where our board have been involved and where approvals have been made. So we tried to tell the story. So I would say absolutely prep and start early, because what it does actually, it kind of helps you almost remember, because you do forget, you're that busy and you know different things day in, day out. But it does help you remember. I found it the most cathartic experience ever, really, because it kind of made you realise actually what you do is you're doing some good stuff, but you just, because you move on from one thing to the next, you kind of sometimes forget. So prepare and be very clear and careful what information you give them, because they do read everything. So don't make their job difficult for them by giving them everything, really, I suppose. So absolutely early prep, early engagement with your advisors, I would say as well. If you are engaging advisors, which I would advise you to do, early engagement with them as well. And you know, obviously DTP were our advisors. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about that in a bit more detail. But yeah, I would say get a team, get a small team of people and a couple of people who are responsible for dropping your documents in, for number, all those things that make the inspector's life a bit easier, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about your team, Sue, and particularly because obviously I know you started to prepare early, but I just wondered how you managed to keep everybody in your team. And I know that team included your colleagues, it included customers who were involved with Salix and your board members. I just wondered, with that early prep, how did you keep them focused on the inspection process?
So we took advantage of our lead inspector often to come and speak to our board and to our customer committee before the inspection even started. And some of that was because of the new regime and people didn't really know what to expect. There'd been a lot of narrative, haven't there, about we don't expect to have many C1 organisations across the sector. So it was a bit daunting until you get to the point where you think, well, you know what we are, we do what we do. So we took advantage of the lead inspector coming in, and it was almost a bit of a reassuring our board members and us really as an exec team and the team, I would say the inspection team. So, you know, the few people who were kind of involved in pulling all those documents together. And we gave regular updates and kept people in the loop of what was going on. We're at this stage, the document submission list has been received. This is what we're doing. This is when we need to get the documents back by. We then were the timetable for the inspectors to come on site and speak to us. So just keep them informed, because there's nothing worse, is there, than, you know, we're all going on about this inspection and regulators coming on site and stuff. If it all goes into a black hole and people don't really know what's going on. So we had staff briefings. We have what we call a lead and Salix group that meet regularly. That's all the managers in the business. And do you know what? It's interesting, isn't it? Because there wasn't that many people who would almost physically be involved in the inspection. The exec team, the customer committee, the board. But what we were doing was showcasing the work of what everyone else in the organisation. So it was important to let people know that actually this is your work. This is what you do. Because I didn't want it to become almost, oh, that's an exec thing and they're doing that. So I would say involve them, even if they're not almost involved in the actual inspection. And, you know, there's times when even the exec team, some of our customer committee members got really quite panicked about it. And I think the advice that I certainly gave to them was be yourself. We're not perfect, but that's fine. Just be yourself and enjoy it, telling people what inspectors, what we do, and be proud of it as well.
I think that's really important, although I do wonder whether enjoying an inspection is something that comes naturally to many people, however.
Maybe that's just me, Andrew.
Maybe so. I just wanted to specifically talking about the inspection process rather than your services, you know, and your performance, things that might have been on your mind about Salix itself. But were there any aspects of the inspection process itself which were particularly challenging?
I think the most challenging part of the inspection was us, was our exec team. We found ourselves having several words with ourselves on occasion. So, because once you get into it, the inspection team came on site and spoke to us as a whole, spent the day with the exec team, and you kind of start reading into everything, don't you? So they'll ask a question and you think, oh, why have they asked that question? They're probably asking the question, and you realise afterwards, we had a fantastic inspection team who I spent quite a lot of time building a relationship beforehand with the lead inspector. And you got to a point where you felt like you could have an honest conversation if you needed to. But you did at times kind of look into everything and almost second guess. You'd give an answer to a question, wouldn't you? And then second guess why they were asking you. I was convinced throughout the process we were going to come out as a V3. So I forgot all about the consumer standards. My head was elsewhere on something else. We received a letter on the Friday afternoon, and it was around the kind of the gap assurance meeting that was coming up. And there's three of us were here, three of the exec team were in, we all read it, and we kind of went into meltdown. And so it says, right, go home. Everyone, let's go home. Come back on Monday. And actually, when you cleared your head a bit and came back on Monday, and you actually broke down what the gaps were in the assurance, they were nothing in comparison, to what we'd been through as part of the process. So I think the biggest challenge, I genuinely do think the biggest challenge was ourselves and kind of going into that bit of a meltdown moment. I think the only other challenge I would say, and I've referred to this earlier, is don't give them every single piece of information that you've got in your files. Give them what they ask for, and they will let you know if they need any more. And there was a challenge at the start. Our team was saying, oh, should we just give them this? Should we just give them? Well, actually, no, because that's not what they've asked for. So, yeah, be very disciplined and use your advisor again. I would say to be very disciplined.
Thanks for being so honest, Sue, because I think that situation that you describe about second guessing and reading maybe a little bit too much into any kind of questions or particularly follow-up queries from the regulator, in my experience of working with our clients on inspection, is something that's very common. And I think it's really interesting because my advice is, take a deep breath, walk away from it and come back, because I think you do have a clearer sight on things once you've gathered your thoughts a little bit. One of the things that you did look at, you had a clear focus about this, was improving your repairs and safety standards. And you've had that focus for a good while at Salix, not because of a specific issue, but because of the challenges that are in the sector at the moment. I just wondered if you could tell us about some of the things that you've focused on in those areas and how you overcame them.
Yeah, so I'll look at safety standards first, I think. People tend to talk about building safety, don't they? And generally, when you talk about building safety, people think about high-rise buildings and Grenfell and cladding and all of that, which we did focus on immediately post-Grenfell. We didn't wait. A lot of people in the sector were waiting to be told what to do with the Building Safety Bill and the Act and stuff. And we took the approach that, on our board, we're with us on this. Building safety is a red line, and if there's anything we need to do and fix, then we need to do and fix it. And it kind of goes back to doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. We found some pretty horrific stuff post-Grenfell, which shocked us. And, I remember my previous chief exec, Lee Sutton, he and I just being absolutely shocked. And I assured him before we found out, and we had some tests done on our box, I assured him that they were all fine, and actually they weren't. We had some really horrific stuff. I get quite upset and emotional about it that someone could do that and walk away with that standard of work, because it wasn't just fair cladding, it was the standard of the work put onto our blocks. I can remember saying to Lee, I will never, ever, ever leave a mess like that for anyone else. And I took responsibility for building safety at that point. So I'm talking 2017. And I swore that I never would. So we focused on building safety from very early on, probably were quite ahead of the game, I would say. But, I'm not boasting about that. Again, it was the right thing to do. But it kind of expanded that beyond, it wasn't just about high-rise buildings, it was about safety full stop. So all our compliance areas, if we have a gas safety certificate that falls out of the cycle by a day, we're going to meltdown. And then you have to kind of have that word with yourself again, don't you? Because we've done everything we can and we might just have to go out and do a bit more with the customers. So I think for us, well, certainly for me, for this organisation, safety standards, building safety, call it what you will, is really, really important to us. And honestly, I'd never want to walk away from this organisation and someone pick some of the rubbish up that Lee and I picked up after Grenfell. So that's kind of been a driver right from the top. I'm the principal accountable person for building safety. So it comes from the top. The board have kind of always been with us on that journey. And it has been a journey and still is a journey, actually. So you never get to the end of something, do you? But I think some of the stuff we've put in place since Grenfell, particularly the work we do with contractors, everyone being responsible for safety, that kind of really paid off for us. In terms of repairs, this was an interesting one because we didn't have a backlog of repairs following COVID. And we weren't really sure why, to be honest, and probably kind of lulled us into a bit of false sense of security, I think, because over the past 18 months, 2 years, demand has absolutely gone through the roof. And it got to the point where our repairs, people were waiting for day-to-day, non-urgent repairs. We're talking 90 days. Sometimes it was quite awful, really, some of the performance, and not because people weren't working hard, just because the demand was so high. So we started looking at our repairs well before inspection. Our customers were involved in it. We spoke to all customers who had complained about repairs, particularly about wait times. We worked with our customer committee. They were heavily involved from day one. We did lots of focus groups with wider customers, involved all the colleagues in the business, whether you were a repairs colleague or a housing management colleague, because everyone was being impacted really by people complaining about repairs. Did a whole kind of session at one of our board away days to say, this is where we're at, this is what the demand's like. And our resources just weren't able to meet the demand. So we did a whole root and branch, completely turned it on its head, trialed all different ways of working. And when the inspection was taking place, we were just coming to the conclusion of the review for repairs. So we were very, very, very honest with the regulator and said, this is where we were, this is what we've done, this is our plan, this is when we expect to see an improvement. And they were very keen to understand the number of open jobs and kind of tracked it through the inspection as well. So what were the number when they first came on site, and what was the number of open jobs when they completed the inspection, because we put some temporary resource in. Very, very keen to understand how vulnerable customers access our repairs and how long they have to wait. If you've got a customer with a disability or any other vulnerability, that they just drop into a pot of day-to-day repairs and wait the 90 days like everyone else? Or do we ask anything specific to make sure that they are prioritised? So we walk them through, and yes, we do. And we walk them through kind of how that worked. And actually, you know, if someone phones up for a repair, there's a whole host of questions we ask. So if they have a disability or a vulnerability, then they will be reprioritised, really. So we were very honest about our repair service and where it was at. We are starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Our board have committed some additional financial resource for over a 5-year period, kind of just for us to get it into the place we want it to be, really, and for it to be an excellent service. So we are starting to see some improvements, but recruitment's been a bit of a challenge. So yeah, that's where we're at with repairs and safety. Don't try and hide it is all I'd say, because they'll just ask lots and lots of questions and find it anyway. So be open and honest, I would say, with the regulator.
Yeah, I would agree. You just mentioned customer engagement, and I just wanted to explore a little bit with you about what role the customer committee played in the inspection process, and I suppose more broadly about that evolution of resident engagement at Salix and whether that's helped you to drive accountability, informed your decision making. And I suppose you've just given an example of how they've been involved in performance improvement, but whether that goes more broadly too.
Our approach to customer engagement, customer involvement, resident engagement, I would also say that's been a journey that we've been on since 2008, to the point where we've evolved over time. We've never let it get stale, I would say. We've kind of always reflected, and we had a customer senate back in the day, but then that became a bit stale. And so we totally reviewed the way we engage our customers, and our customer committee was set up back end of 2019, early 2020, and they didn't meet in person until 2022 because of COVID. But we have the most committed group of individuals. This was something new, I think, that we tried. We said, let's treat our customer committee the way we would treat any other committee that sits alongside our board. We're going to pay people, so let's just see what kind of interest we get. And we got a few hundred people who said they'd like to be involved, and probably wasn't just the money either. They wanted to make a real difference. So we've got a real diverse customer committee. We've subsequently set up subgroups of that committee who look at specific areas, procurement, complaints. We have a high-rise living forum subgroup. And then there's the wider kind of customer. So how is the voice of the wider customer heard? We've got our customer connectors, and people know that they can feed in through quite a number of our engagement mechanisms, really. But it all kind of feeds up to the customer committee. So if someone comes along there with a proposal to do something or change something, they'll want to know how we've consulted, or they'll agree a consultation plan. The customer committee itself has evolved. It's not a tick box group of people. They have a very strategic role. They will look at strategy, policy, they will commission scrutiny, they will scrutinise our performance. So sometimes I find our colleagues and our staff are a bit more nervous about going to customer committee than going to board. And that's because they do hold them accountable, and they will probably ask the so what questions quite a lot. So I think, our customer committee were great. They were very nervous as a group of people before the inspectors come on site, because again, they didn't know what to expect. But the inspectors got a true reflection. They met with the customer committee without any officers in the room prior to one of their meetings, and then they observed one of their meetings, and they were very, very honest with them. And I think that's what we tried to instill. Be honest, talk to them about the difference you make, and talk to them about the things that you think haven't gone well and could go better. So yeah, for anyone who has a committee-like structure, I would make sure that that isn't a tick box, because the inspectors will see right through that. And they actually commented and said, when they were giving us feedback, we always know when someone's putting a show on for us, but you certainly didn't. Neither did your customer committee, and neither did your board. If we take anything to board for approval, then we will always have to demonstrate in a report how the customer's been involved in that decision making. So yeah, I would say it's in our DNA, and that sounds a bit cheesy, that, doesn't it? But I just think this has been a journey for a number of years. And ironically, I joined this organisation in 2008 to do a temporary job to get the organisation ready for an inspection. How ironic. And it was almost from that point, not because of me, just because of the organisation, we started seeing customers differently and valuing them. And so it probably is part of our DNA, but it has evolved. It does get stale sometimes, and you do have to refresh it.
Having met members of your customer committee as part of the work we did with you, I can absolutely attest they know their role and they're not afraid to say it. So it might be early days to ask you this question, but I just wondered whether you'd had any feedback from the broader community since you've achieved the C1 rating, and whether you've seen any kind of shift in resident perceptions about Salix yet?
We have had some feedback from community groups, from individual customers and, said, great and well done and well deserved. We know you're a great organisation. I think it probably is a little bit early because I think what's also happening at the same time, we restructured the organisation last year. I felt, lost a bit of that kind of customer touch, call it what you will, I think, post-COVID, are probably not dissimilar to many organisations. And we made a conscious decision last year to get back to our roots. And we wanted to bring back that traditional housing management approach. So one housing officer, very small patch, people being visible, customers knowing we're there. We've knocked on everyone's door. We go out every quarter, everyone from the organisation. Don't matter what your job is, but we all go out, and whether it's a lit pick in the community or filling in, getting to know you surveys so that we've got as much information about our customers as possible. So I think there's been a couple of things going on, if I'm honest. I think customers are starting to see us more. We've built that relationship back up that I think we lost during COVID. I think the focus was very different. We were ringing our vulnerable customers through COVID, but people didn't see us out and about, obviously. Officers were overwhelmed when they came back. We had lots of new people. So I think there's a number of things gone on. We've introduced a new customer support team to deal with customers with complex needs. So I think it probably isn't just the outcome of the inspection. I think people can see that we're just committed to kind of getting that relationship back to where it was, I suppose.
I think that's interesting because my view externally would be that those two things are definitely intertwined, the C1
Absolutely.
with that work that you've done around visibility, listening, etc. So, yeah, big question for this one, Sue. For other housing associations, or any housing provider really, aiming for a C1 rating, what's the one piece of advice you'd offer them? And then second part is there anything you'd do differently?
But the first thing I'd say is don't aim for it necessarily, but give yourself time to think about what you do on a day-to-day basis, what your people do, how you lead your organisation, how the organisation's governed, how your board is assured. Think about all those things because they're the things that will help you achieve a C1. And yeah, I suppose, ultimately it's outcomes for customers, isn't it? And it's not about whether it's a C1 but it actually is about the outcomes for your customers. So I would say take time, give yourself time. You probably know when you're due for an inspection. I'd say give yourself a whole chunk of time to just reflect so that you can present the best version of yourselves. And I would say there's more C1 organisations out there than we've led to believe there's going to be. So be proud. Again, I'd say be proud of what you do, but be prepared. Be absolutely prepared. If you have to take people out of your business or out of their day-to-day job to get you in the best place, and you almost need someone who'll challenge you and challenge the exec team, just have someone in that space, I would say. And honestly, be proud of what you do, but be honest about what you do as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything I'd do differently? I don't know, I think as we were going through it, you think, oh, should have done that in a different way. But looking back on it, I think we probably did as much as we could. Would we have done anything differently? I honestly don't think so, That sounds a bit conceited, doesn't it?
No, not really. I
It
don't
didn't
think so.
feel like that when we were going through it, Angela. It absolutely didn't feel like that. As opposed to the thing I'd do differently. Well, hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? The thing you do differently is kind of what I said before, is don't look into everything. When you're being asked for follow-up information. And they did ask us for quite a bit of follow-up information, particularly around repairs and stock condition data. But yeah, I don't know if there is, actually.
Yeah. That's fair enough, I think. Yeah. So final question, Sue. You're stepping down in the near future as Chief Exec of Salix. Looking forward, what qualities do you think are essential for the new leadership to maintain and build upon your high standards and take the organisation forward?
Getting a bit real now, you see. So this is my decision, and I made the decision early in the year, and it's the right time. It's the right time for someone else to take the organisation forward now, but it is getting a bit real. So what qualities, and I think these qualities are the most important in a leader. I think authenticity. I think if you're not authentic, people will see right through you. Honesty. And, you know, sometimes you have to give difficult messages, and I have had to give some difficult messages in this organisation. You know, immediately post-transfer, we had to lose quite a lot of staff because of rent reductions. But I've always given those messages with honesty and don't shy away from difficult conversations. Authenticity, honesty, empathy, know your people, know your customers. Be visible. Don't be a figurehead. I would say be visible. That's what I would want to make sure that our chief exec or new chief exec, it won't be my appointment, obviously, it'll be the board's appointment. But yeah, I feel quite nervous really that it really key we get the right person. It'll be quite a sad day for me to hand over. But, you know, I feel confident that I'm handing something fantastic over to the next person. And don't be afraid. Someone who's not afraid to say they've got it wrong.
Thank you. I think one thing that is really important in my limited experience of inspection, that whole thing about the culture is so vital to where you get to, and that culture can only come from that description of leadership that you've just given. So thank you. More broadly, Sue, thank you for sharing your journey to achieving this, what I think is an incredible milestone for Salix Homes, and for offering such honest insights into the process. I mean, I think a C1 rating is a really significant marker, but as you've highlighted, really, it's the impact on your tenants and residents that really matters. And I think is a culmination at Salix Homes of what you've done in that respect.
So I'm just going to say, because I don't think we've covered this enough, you know, DTP, you particularly supported us leading up to our inspection. So honestly, don't underestimate that kind of support, I would say, because, you know, you particularly were fantastic for our board, our committee, and us as an exec team as well. Well, I would say the biggest thing that we took from you, Angela, was assurance. I think you kept us in a space where we were calm for most of the time, but, you know, you kind of assured us about be yourself, put the best version of yourself forward, and you'll be fine. And I think what you did for our board and our custom committee was, I think you got them in such a great space. So I would say to organisations, don't underestimate that, because it's good to have that kind of external validation as well of what you're doing.
No, thank you, Sue. I appreciate that. I mean, I suppose I would always say it's easier for me to do that, isn't it? Because we're outside. But thank you. It's kind of you to say that. I do think that your commitment at Salix to that transparency and resident engagement has set a high bar, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how you continue to build on that success. And we'd also, the DTP team and myself, we'd really like to wish you the best in your retirement when you get to it. Although at DTP, we tend to call it redeployment to whatever you then want to do. And we think this C1 rating is certainly a really great way, particularly given you said how you started with Salix on inspection, to end on that really positive is a really wonderful high. To all of our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and you've took away some valuable insights into best practice. If you'd like to understand how DTP can support your organisation in the inspection process, then please do get in touch. Thank you very much.